Welcome to Power Players, where we cast an analytical gaze upon the tectonic shifts in global affairs. I'm Hossein Khanbagi, and today we explore a vital question that reverberates through the corridors of power. Can economic coercion truly backfire? Economic coercion, often dressed as sanctions or trade embargoes, is the weapon of choice for powerful states seeking to assert their dominance without a single shot fired. At times, sanctions are imposed to coerce a regime into playing by the hegemon's rule, and by hegemons I mean being a state with dominance influence over others, such as the United States. Other times, the sole aim is to outright overthrow of the regime. Yet both scenarios frequently yields unintended counterproductive results. To fully grasp why this tactic often fails to align with its intended outcomes, we must first understand how sanctions are supposed to work. So, if you have interest in this subject, stay with me to the end of this program.
Welcome to Power Players, your source for in-depth international political analysis and breaking news reviews. Join us as we dissect global events, decode headlines, and explore the intricate web of geopolitics. Subscribe now and stay informed.
Sanctions, their varying in form and method, share a single purpose: to inflict economic hardship upon the target nation. By restricting export and imports, blocking financial transactions, or curtailing foreign investments, the goal is to trigger a significant outflow of capital, leading to a crippling economic deficit. As inflation and unemployment rise hand in hand, the government's ability to fulfill its commitments wanes, and the aspirations of its people become increasingly distant. When inflation makes ordinary life an unbearable burden and economic stability lies beyond reach, the state faces a dilemma: suppress the growing domestic discontent, risking further destabilization, or capitulate to the demands of the coercing power. Crucially, all of this is intended to occur without any military engagement. However, does this scenario play out as planned? Not often. When examined closely, economic coercion not only fails to achieve its aims, but frequently backfires in profound ways. Consider Russia following the 2014 annexation of Crimea. The imposition of Western sanctions aimed to isolate Russia economically, intending to weaken it by cutting off access to Western markets. Yet rather than buckle under the pressure, Russia redirected its economic gaze eastward, expanding its energy export and fortifying its trade alliances with China and India. This maneuver not only blunted the impact of sanctions, but also sparked a significant shift in global trade, a vivid illustration of how multipolarity challenges the efficacy of isolation as a strategy. Economic coercion, while often heralded as a tool to compel nations to align with the hegemon's rule without resorting to military conflict, frequently carries the seeds of the very confrontation it aims to avoid. When we look more closely, history shows us that sanctions can escalate tensions to the brink of war. Consider the oil embargo on Japan in the lead up to the World War II. Far from bowing to economic pressure, Japan struck back with a devastating attack on Pearl Harbor. Likewise, sanctions imposed on Russia after the annexation of Crimea have been followed not by submission, but by military action in Ukraine. These examples illustrate how the supposed nonviolent path of economic coercion can in reality set the stage for violent confrontation. Building on this, let us examine the notion of interdependence, the intricate web of trade, finance, and resources that links nations in a delicate dance of mutual reliance. At first glance, one might assume that interdependence fosters peace, as liberal theories often argue. However, as Kenneth Waltz astutely pointed out, interdependence is a double-edged sword, for it also creates vulnerabilities. When a nation depends heavily on another for essential resources, such as oil or technology, it becomes susceptible to economic manipulation. Europe's dependency on Russian gas serves as a stark reminder. The steady flow of energy pipeline from east to west has tempered Europe's responses to Moscow's action, revealing how economic reliance can turn into a silent tether. Meanwhile, the US and China, though frequently at odds, are entangled in a complex reciprocal dependence. China relies on American technological expertise and market access, while the US benefits from Chinese manufacturing for its supply chains. Here, economic coercion becomes a high-stakes gamble, as the risk and repercussions are not confined to a single actor, but reverberate through the entire global economy. This is where structuralism, as espoused by Waltz, offers profound insights. Structural realism persists that the anarchic structure of the international system drives states to prioritize survival above all else. In this context, economic sanctions often fail because states will adapt to ensure the survival, redirecting their alliances and resources to counterbalance the pressure exerted upon them. Waltz's theory suggests that sanctions do not simply fail due to poor strategy, but because they conflict with the fundamental drive for self-preservation embedded in the global system. Furthermore, sanctions fundamentally alter the internal power dynamics of the targeted nation. As official economic channels dwindle, the private sector, often the first to suffer, is increasingly marginalized. Economic power consolidates within the hands of the government and those closest to it. With military and intelligence capabilities backing these efforts, the public sector emerges as the primary economic lifeline for citizens. For instance, in Iran, prolonged sanctions have led to the empowerment of state-backed enterprises and entities linked to the government, which alone possess the resources to navigate around sanctions. Citizens, in turn, grow increasingly dependent on the state. This reliance breeds conservatism amongst the populace, which can erode the potential for domestic dissent. Ironically, sanctions intended to destabilize a regime may end up fortifying it. History has shown this in Cuba as well, where decades of US sanctions have not only failed to bring about regime change, but have arguably entrenched the existing government's power. This leads us to consider the long-term consequences of sanctions. Rather than weakening regimes, sanctions often entrench them, as evidenced by Cuba and North Korea. In these instances, economic coercion does not bring about compliance or regime change, but instead serves to harden animosities and prolong standoffs. As sanctioned nations unite under a common adversary, they often form a resilient bloc, strengthening their collective resolve against the coercer. For example, the recent collaboration between sanctioned nations like Iran, Venezuela, and Russia in sharing resources and trade strategies illustrate how this network can resist external pressure more effectively. As we contemplate the future, it's crucial to recognize that the impact of sanctions extended beyond immediate economic effects. In a world with competing spheres of influence, where powers like China and Russia challenge the dominance of traditional Western hegemons, the political implications of economic coercion are substantial. These emerging alliances born of a shared defense could very well reshape the global order by banding together sanctioned nations, are not only resisting economic pressure but are also questioning the very supremacy of the hegemon. This poses a more profound threat, the erosion of unilateral influence as the balance of power shifts, symbolizing a break from the post-Cold War unipolar world. To warm up, this is clear that sanctions can often push nations to form new alliances, counteracting the very isolation they were meant to create. When nations are deeply interconnected, the vulnerabilities created by interdependence make economic coercion a risky game. Instead of isolating regimes, sanctions can end up forging resilience blocs united in defense against the coercing powers. Structuralism helps us to understand why countries adapt and push back, placing survival above all else. And let us not forget, sanctions can actually end up strengthening the regimes they target, shifting the power dynamics internally and entrenching the very leaders they're meant to weaken. So, as we move forward, we find ourselves in an era where one superpower no longer dictates the global rules as it once did. Today, economic reliance and strategic alliances are rewriting the playbook on power, survival, and influence. Thank you for joining us on Power Plays. If this exploration sparked some new insight, don't forget to like, subscribe, and tap that notification bell to stay in the loop. And I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Until next time, stay informed and stay engaged.
Subscribe, stay informed, and remember, in politics, nothing is ever as it seems.